So good evening. My name is Vaishnavi Shankar, and I'm leading the training and capacity building vertical at the Climate Center for Cities at the National Institute of Urban Affairs. I welcome you all to the first session of the 10-part learning series. This is being organized by the Climate Center for Cities at NIUA in collaboration with the World Resource Institute India. Before we begin, I've already mentioned on the chat box, but it'll be really helpful if all the participants can mention their name and their email ID. We'll be able to share more details on this event and the upcoming events. We're also streaming the session on Facebook. Please follow the NIUA page to access the live streaming in case you face any trouble viewing from this particular platform. So in our first session today, we will be discussing on the ways to mainstream resilience in cities. And the words that come to my mind when we talk about resilience is basically springing back to shape, bouncing back, and even bouncing forward. So to broadly define resilience, especially in the context of climate change, it can be understood as the capacity to absorb, respond, and recover from climate disasters, along with building adaptive capacity to reduce future climate risks. And cities are increasingly becoming the platform to address climate change, basically for two key reasons. One, the scale of urbanization and economic significance of cities. At least in India, it is estimated that the cities will support more than 40% of the country's population and more than 75% of the national GDP by 2030. So in order to safeguard the lives of people and also to protect the assets and the investments, I think the focus wherein cities need to build resilience cannot be emphasized further. And the second reason is that cities are experiencing the severe impacts of climate change. And just to maybe further illustrate this, in 2020, we had around 10 Indian cities that experienced severe flooding. And on the top of the head, all of us know how Hyderabad had to tackle the flooding in 2020. And in 2019, we had 8 other Indian cities that were ranked as the 15 hottest places on Earth. And even the IPCC 1.5 degree special report also projects that India is likely to experience more cyclone, especially with high intensity storms, and has a higher risk due to extreme rainfall and annually occurring heat waves. And of course, the recent flash floods in Himachal Pradesh and the landslide in Uttarakhand in India and the unprecedented heat wave in Canada that is proving fatal is a recent reminder that and that emphasizes the need to build resilience. So with this context, I am pleased to introduce the expert panel of speakers we have today, who will discuss how we can basically build resilience in our cities. We have Mr. Mahesh Harhare, Ms. Nupur Proti Khanna, and Mr. Saurabh Gadani on our panel, and a warm welcome to all our speakers. So let us begin today's discussion with starting with stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement basically is crucial for providing nuanced understanding of challenges that can inform action plans. And further, the stakeholders can also support in realizing these plans. And in a city, we can look at institutions that basically provide horizontal and sort of vertical linkages and support to do so. So if I can maybe elaborate a little further, and for instance, basically in any country, we have like the federal or the national government, we have the state governments and the city governments and various other departments that are aligned to provide support. And on the other hand, we have the academia, the private sector, the businesses, and the civil society, which can kind of provide the horizontal support that is required to build resilience. And to discuss further on these aspects, I would invite our first speaker, Mr. Mahesh Harhare. Mahesh is the Chief Resilience Officer of Pune as part of the Resilient Cities Network. He has over 16 years of experience working in Indian cities on key urban sector related assignments, supported by external funding agencies such as ADB, IFC, GIZ, USAID, World Bank, and BMGF, and various state governments. He has also worked in advisory capacity with GIZ and IUC India. And Pune is well known for its active citizen and civil society participation. And I would like to invite Mahesh to share his experience of working with the various stakeholders of Pune in developing the resilience strategy. Over to you, Mahesh.
Thank you, Vaishnavi. I will share my screen. I have just a couple of slides. Thank you Ravi, for that nice introduction. So in Pune, we are working on the resilience strategy and implementation of action of the resilience strategy. Pune started its journey around 2017 when Rockefeller Foundation's program 100 Resilient Cities select Pune as one of the 100 in the global platform where cities with a resilient strategy and build resilience over the period of time. So the journey is quite a long journey considering 2017 January when we started first workshop. Initially we took time, 6 to 8 months even to understand what is happening in the city, understand what are different initiatives being taken, and one of the important aspect in the entire journey is the stakeholder consultation and having interaction with different key experts, citizens, different groups. So we took initial time to understand what they are doing, what is happening on ground. We had a series of workshop you can see here where we involved different stakeholders, right from government agencies, the NGOs, different uh, sections of the society who are representing citizen groups, where we kind of identified key issues city is looking for. At the same time, we also looked at the different initiatives taken by the city during last 10 years. So we kind of looked at more than 200 projects and initiatives because we thought perception assessment is one dimension where you will get understanding about issues and challenges and what are the failures and success and how to build the resilience in that. Second aspect is what is happening, what is the trend, what are the priorities for the government and agencies. So we looked at it from a different angle where we looked at inventory of different projects and initiatives for past 10 years and we kind of overlap that for each other. So that gave us a very thorough analysis and then we could find out 4 priority areas which city could take up forward. So that is one set of approach we adopted where different stakeholders were involved. At the same time, we felt that it's not only just identification of different stakeholders and understanding them, but parallelly building capacity of the organization is also necessary. So where the RCN platform, Resilient Cities platform, help us in having exposure to different programs, network exchanges such as City Exchange, Resilience Accelerator. In one of the programs, we thought that we will take up one project, which is a very crucial project for the city, like the river management project. We took that project in our one of the network exchange programs, where the representatives from Singapore and Melbourne were present. They exchange with the city officials their challenges, how they overcome the challenges. At the same time, how to build the resilience in terms of looking at nature-based solutions and also blue-green infrastructure. So that was very critical because the city officials were learning from their peers and also learning uh, how they are tackled the challenges. So that was very critical and that helped city in basically refining some of their actions. Obviously, not all the action, but at least some of the actions. Then further, we thought that this is the one step ahead where we are looking at building the resilience. Another step was having an accelerator program through which we involved the Columbia University, supported by a Rockefeller Foundation and Resilient City Network, where a group of students, master students from Columbia University, USA, came to Pune and also they tied up with the local institutes to identify 7 stretches of the river where a lot of stakeholders were involved. They went on site, they understood what citizens' perception is there. So this is another layer of interaction and consultation which we kind of built into our actions, which help us in streamlining not only the strategy action, but also putting the resilience lens in some of the ongoing projects. Apart from that, we had a different set of interactions like City Exchange, where a project like solid waste management, where we are talking about the climate change action and GHG emission as a priority. So we took those kind of a project to venture capitalists and the other funders, where we kind of showcase that project and we were trying to look at how to use the ICT and different technologies to improve the waste management system. So in short, this is a kind of a multi-pronged approach where initially we had interaction with different experts where we identified key areas. Within those key areas, before identifying key actions, we had an interaction, peer-to-peer interaction where city officials interacted with other cities. At the same time, we also interacted with the VCs and funders to understand their opinion and their perspective in terms of putting money in this kind of a project as well. So it's a comprehensive approach where we went from a holistic city level approach to smaller action level or a project level approach. And that was very fruitful in terms of making our strategy very comprehensive, and some of the actions are taken up by city as well on priority. One such action is focusing on plastic waste management, where Pune is also part of the Urban Ocean program supported by Resilient Cities Network and other funding agencies like Circular Capital, where we are focusing on plastic waste management, and through Accelerator program, we will try to build the resilience around that aspect so that the overall solid waste management objective can be met. So this is example of a Pune city which highlights the collaboration and also taking into account the local understanding and taking those insights in building the resilience strategy. Thank you. Over to you, Vaishnavi.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mahesh, for taking us through the process basically that was followed in Pune. I think the point that basically strikes a chord with me here is that one is, of course, the perception assessment of stakeholders in understanding where the concerns lie and also where the aspirations lie to a certain extent. And the other thing is the capacity building, not only in terms of providing training, but also in various different forms, like you just mentioned about the city exchange with Bellagio and also the accelerator program with Columbia University, in a way as to how this can build the capacity of institutions to take up some actions, or maybe to like restructure some of the ways they work to because of this sort of an exchange and twinning. So I think this is also very helpful for me to sort of segue to the next discussion that I had in mind, which is mostly looking at the accumulated resilience of cities. So basically the development of with respect to infrastructure and service provision like water, sanitation, and drainage connection, solid waste collection like plastic waste management that Mahesh mentioned, and also access to healthcare are essential for building the adaptive capacity to extreme disasters to climate change. And this is in a way what we call as accumulated resilience, because this provides a foundation for responding to climate change to a certain extent. And in this context, the different kind of topics that also, if I can reflect back on what Mahesh said, as to looking at what the city has been doing in the last 10 years and leveraging on the ongoing work can be one of the ways to mainstream resilience. And now if I can draw all of your attention to ecological planning, we'll able to understand the potential of how this particular approach can mitigate risks beyond improving the quality of lives. And to discuss further on the core benefits of how this can be achieved, I would invite our next speaker, Ms. Nupur Proti Kanha. Nupur Proti is a landscape architect, planner, and a heritage conservationist, currently elected as the international board member of ICOMOS. In her experience of over 25 years, she has engaged with private and municipal clients across the world. And as a founder of Beyond Build, she has been striving to bring about a difference by focusing on reviving cultural heritage and ecological planning to safeguard the future of our cities. A warm welcome to Nupur, and over to you.
Thank you, Vaishnavi. It's a privilege to be here with eminent colleague Saur Mahesh. And thank you for this question, because this is what my quest has been and is going to be for the next few decades. So I think it's a bit entwined with your whole idea of the questions you were asking about stakeholder before the question you raised to me about ecology. What we are trying to do now in our work and through whatever advocacy we take up is about plugging into what people know, not taking our expertise to people, but working with what people know and what they bring out in, and how they want to co-create with us. There are many examples and many little narratives I can give you from all over the world, because when you start focusing on cultural heritage, intangible heritage as well, you start realizing that each community is so enriched with memory. They can tell you about how their locality came up, even if they're migrants, how their locality came up, what is the situation back home in their village, so their understanding of ecology from a very sort of cultural narrative, where we need to plug and put our lens for future innovation. And this is the message I'm taking to whether it's the Stockholm Water Week, whether it is to any forum, any meeting. Within the board also, I'm looking at nature culture issues. So ecology and cultural heritage gets shortened into nature culture. So I'm looking at nature culture issues, saying that any innovation we look at for handling climate change, for looking at resilience, has to look at that context. And that text is composed of a cultural narrative, a cultural perspective, and a basic ecology of the place. Being a landscape architect, I think you are almost brought to that. You don't design without, the site speaks to us. So every time we are working on any city, I'll quickly take the example of Chennai, which is not represented here, but quickly taking the example of Chennai, the same city pulsating from drought to flooding to, it's a pulse. It's a rhythm, and it's the wrong rhythm that has set into all our cities. Now, there is a eventuality of climate change, and then there is how we are mitigating it, how we are addressing it, how we are reacting to it. What happens is that because we are not really looking at where we are in a very small effort, each discipline, looking at how that discipline can contribute to that change, as well as each person looking at how they can bring about the change. I'll quickly mention here that seeing all of this happening around me, and we did some work on Chennai, water bodies. I've been working on water bodies in India for a long time. I started realizing every time we talk about water, the clients look at that water feature. Whereas when we come in, we look at what we call the cultural landscape. We look at connectivity, because water is only about connectivity. The problem that you see in a point is usually the source is far away. And if you don't start understanding as a generalist, and understanding the landscape for it, also look at solutions. If we don't focus on what people can bring as a solution, very often I find as professionals, we propose the solutions, we take the solutions to people, we buy them in, we talk them through it, and then the solution fails. Or the solution is successful, but there's no longevity to the solution. There's no stewardship to it. So any solution that we're seeking, I always say, has to come from people. It has to come from them. And the latest project we've just completed, and now we're getting into the second phase, is with the Stockholm Resilience Center, with a small organization of practitioners called Sweat Bio, where we've changed our conversation and we've taken the whole culture, nature narrative to children and young adults to see how they perceive their environment and what innovation they want to bring in. So we are sort of saying that we know what we know, but we need to change our audience and we need to change our innovators. So thank you very much.
Great. I think that's a very interesting perspective that you've actually brought into the discussion. I think one is about the co-creation and not seeking solutions from at least the practitioners, but at least to understand what solutions already are there amongst people's minds and try to take that forward. And the other interesting sort of a point that you raised was about the ecology in the sense of a cultural perspective and narrative. And I think here it might be useful to mention that in Chennai and basically in South India, all of these temples usually have a water body attached to it. And although we relate to that as in a cultural sense, or maybe even a religious sense, but it also has an ecological importance that it plays with the water that is being collected over there. Maybe it's rain fed and things like that. So reviving those also is one of the ways to basically see how a city can maybe tackle a flood or something of that sort. So I think this is very, very interesting. And taking a segue from the work that you mentioned about talking on culture and nature sort of work and working with the stakeholders and getting their sort of inputs in this, I think I'll quickly move on to the next topic, which is again, with respect to the networks that we can create, because cities being at the forefront of the discussion, especially in climate change, in the recent years, we've seen some successful networks and connect various cities and their municipalities for shared learning and also to orient their work towards climate change. And such engagements, along with peer learning and also the support that it brings in, has sort of provoked a renewed effort at the urban scale to address climate-related challenges. And to discuss further on this particular topic and how cities have basically benefited with such a network, and to highlight maybe what has worked in some of the cities, I would like to invite our next speaker, Ms. Saurabh Dedani. Saurabh is part of the Programs, Innovation and Impact team at Resilient Cities, where he leads program design, strategic partnerships, and operations. Prior to that, he was part of the 100 Resilience Cities initiative, which built a network of cities and organizations to advance work in resilience and climate adaptation, mostly targeting three critical challenges of our century, the 21st century, which is urbanization, globalization, and climate change. Saurabh also has over 12 years of international development expertise with a deep understanding of climate resilience, disaster response, urban governance, circular economy, mitigation, environment degradation, and other such complex challenges, especially in the Asia Pacific region. So over to you, Saurabh. Looking forward to hear from you.
Thank you, Vaishnavi, for the introduction. And also, I will also appreciate the points which Mahesh made and points which Nupur made. I will try to maybe speak to those and link those through some examples when I present. So I think I will, before we get to the meat, I will just speak a little, bear with me for a couple of minutes. I will speak about resilient cities so you do understand the organization and how the organization has evolved from its predecessor on the foundation of Resilient Cities Network. And really, I think the Resilient Cities Network has become the world's leading urban resilience network, and more than a network of city leaders or political leaders. It's more of a network of practitioners, and which is led by practitioners, along with our chief resilience officers, along with the city officials who are working day to day on ground and day to day working on projects and really implementing the climate resilience or resilience and on ground, making a more equitable and sustainable future for all the citizens. I think the network is city-led, is regionally driven, it's partner-based and impact focused, and we do build on a foundation of Resilient Cities program, and we bring in all the member cities who are present in 6 continents, speaking 21 languages, and currently in 47 countries. India being one of our key focus, but also we have a quite deep sort of strength and membership in Asia Pacific region, and along with Latin America, Europe, Africa, and North America. As credentialed, the organization has, I guess, raised over more than $3 billion for implementing resilience projects in our member cities, or channelize that money for implementation. Have supported cities in changing how they govern or institutionalize resilience offices, or integrate some of the climate risks in their policies, but also move and really embed resilience principles in city plans and policies and practice. And I think Mahesh has been very at the forefront of that work in Pune. And the last point is at least 77% of the cities have made the chief resilience officer a full-time position within the city councils or within the municipal corporations. And it's something which I will like to see in India, but we are currently at a phase where the Indian system has the chief resilience officers, but are not sort of municipal staff members. They are all working in a private capacity or an officer on special duty capacity. How our approach sort of encompasses 3 aspects. One is empower, so looking at bringing in a globally responsive network, but also create advocacy and bringing in knowledge in the cities. is, and on the knowledge we mobilize the resources, be it fund, be it programmatic partnership, be it bringing in future funding or early stage project preparation. And once we have mobilized it, we help our member cities to implement this project or build capacity or share best practices and scale these projects. So the projects becomes implementable rather than just mere wish lists. As a network, we are very focused on having as climate resilience as one of the strong pillar, and the other one being circularity with the health recovery or the resilient recovery because of the COVID-19 challenges, equity and economic opportunity being transversals to this vertical pillar. The Urban Ocean program, which Mahesh mentions, fall within the second thematic pillar. And we hope that with that, we are not just solving the waste management challenge of the city, but we are also building resilience of a city. We are also creating jobs. We are not creating centralized system or waste to energy plants in the cities, but how cities move into a decentralized system, paving jobs and livelihood along with a more resilient systems into the cities. And we will follow that for climate resilience space as well. And we have some fellow program partners and funders for these thematic areas. How we are doing it, I think one of the peer learnings or Empower example is our peer-to-peer learning campaign called City on Frontline. It's an open public platform. You feel free to join. If you go on our website, you will be able to sign up to that, and we aggregate best practices and put in webinars, maybe similar to the one what Vaishnavi is doing for the Climate Center for Cities, but done with resilient recovery in mind. We also move on forming community of practices. These are usually only for our member cities, but we try to aggregate knowledge and find clear problem statements so we can deploy investments or programs or any targeted solutions based on the demand in our cities. And I think, and that's the Urban Ocean program is really at the crossroads of testing out this multi-city approach, which is spanning across the topic areas and really working on one issue over globally, targeted on 5 cities in Latin America and Asia Pacific, Pune being one of the cities in India, playing a dual role. Also a city which has the problem, but also sharing its best practices when it comes to community-led waste management practices. But really looking at this particular ocean plastic leakage or waste management is a systemic problem, and resolving it rather than looking at what I say sort of a piecemeal approach, but really looking in a systematic way and then concentrating on where the gap is in the system, in the waste management system. The project moves are really targets on getting at least 5 projects out of from the program and hopefully implemented and link them to a project preparation facility or to the venture capitalists who are funding this program for us. I think I will skip this slide and just move and sort of maybe an information and open to all information as we are struggling with the COVID-19 recovery. So we prepared based on our experience, and a lot of this was supported also by the member cities and their knowledge in dealing with COVID-19 challenge. We prepared a toolkit for resilient recovery. It's an open source kit. You can go to our website. You will be able to find and some of the tools which can be deployed into your project work or into ongoing recovery work into your cities, either by the corporation or the city council members or private sector members who are helping city council. Feel free to use these resources. And if you require more information for this toolkit, you can reach out to me or the NIUA team, who is also the owner of this toolkit. And this is where I think I will move and try to speak to examples, as what Mahesh mentioned was a very thorough process of not just stakeholder engagement, but bringing the verticals of the city and the horizontals of the city together to prepare resilience strategy. And with actually the map which Mahesh presented, that stakeholder engagement, if Mahesh sits down and talks about how much time he spent to get that one of the circles ticked, he would have, I think that will be a book on its own of how stakeholder engagement is so important when it comes to long-term planning for the city. These are not a 5-year or a 10-year work. These are live documents, and most of the time these are the work of a generation. So when the city of Rotterdam had two of the main rivers were polluted, it took them 30 years to move from a polluted river to a river and to a system which is clean, or the wastewater is taken care of. Yet there is a microplastics in that river. Yet it is not naturalized. It doesn't have ecological link. It is the solution, which is a 20th century solution and not 21st century solution. But still, these strategies have that will require that, and we have delivered it in 82 cities, and we hope that we get to help other cities as well to get these plans out. And as an example, how these action plans will come on ground, or these strategies will come on ground. Maybe one of the examples which I was part of and I helped push forward is making Surat's water plazas, or making Surat water resilient, and before I start presenting, I will just say to Nupur as well. I know it's not an ecological solution. I know the city needs to take a step forward and look at it as an ecological solution. But we were looking at it as an infrastructure piece. And really, I think, Vaishnavi, as you mentioned, we knew this. We knew about water treatments. Our temples, our tanks had that solution as an infrastructure piece planned in our cities. We lost the plot, and we have to bring in Rotterdam to convince Surat to do exactly the same thing, which maybe 500 years ago our ancestors were doing as a no-brainer, as a part maybe of a spiritual exercise. But that is really where I think the partnership of a network like Resilient Cities comes to play, of how you can bring in the cities to work together towards one solution, taking on inspirations and so bringing in investment. So that partnership would have been not possible without the European Union's IUC program, which basically we leverage to push the Surat and Rotterdam partnership to aid Surat to look at its water, to bringing water resilience. While yes, Rotterdam looked at its water plaza in a very urban manner. This water plaza also has a retention tank, because that's what is the problem in Rotterdam. They have to store water very fast, and then they need to pump out that water to the sea, or to the nearby river. In Surat's case, the water needs to percolate, or needs to put it into the nearby river, so that it solves its water scarcity issue. And that is what I think the city is trying to catch all the rain, but also using the concept of a Kale Kund. The COVID-19 really put the project or else it was in a tender stage. I hope the project will go forward once we come out of this pandemic. The second example of implementing resilience is I think, the platform we are in. That platform, when we were thinking of working in cities in India, it would have been not, it is not possible to work in Indian cities on their own. You have to take both the approaches, which is the bottom-up approach and the top-down approach. And that is really why, and this, at the rate of the urbanization and the scale of the urbanization, and that immediate need to aggregate, like which are the best practices, really, which practices, which Pune is doing might be beneficial for a Hubli or an Agartala or Nasik, who are tier 3 cities and who are coming up. So let's not repeat the mistakes. Let's have let's aggregate our best practices and push it into a unit which shares it at the national level, at the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, or either NIUA level, where the urban local bodies can refer to, which get the look of the Urban Resilience Unit, which was housed under the National Institutes of Urban Affairs, funded and created by Resilient Cities Network. And for 2 years, that unit has worked quite tirelessly to really support NIUA, support the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs leadership to push urban resilience agenda at the national levels, and also not ignoring the urban local bodies and the national level institutions and the universities. And I think that is what I call as a success for urban resilience, where now this center, after the end of the grant period, sits within the NIUA in the name of Climate Center for Cities. And I guess the mandate has become far bigger. The team, which was at the when the unit was there, were 4. Now it have become more than 10, or I think close to 15 people. And now they have a larger mandate to do it for all of the up to 4,000 ULBs in India, along with supporting the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So maybe that is a more policy level, but we require that. We won't be able to we have to fight the 1,000 wars all at the same time. So maybe doing it at a national level is the way to start, and then percolating onto the cities. So Mahesh, me, and the Climate Center for Cities and the professionals like Nupur can fight our own battles along this larger umbrella of a center of excellence. I will stop here. I think I will not present the Rotterdam's resilient neighborhood thing. I think Mahesh presented on the stakeholder engagement, maybe, which speaks to the participants who have joined. So we'll stop here, Vaishnavi.
All right. Thank you so much, Saurabh. I think I'm going to just re-highlight 3 points that I stood out for me in your opening remarks. Basically, one is building partnership between cities to nudge that inspiration that they have. Like we're talking about the Surat and the Rotterdam sort of an connect. And the second, I liked that you pointed out the sort of what Nupur said with respect to ecological versus how we are looking at some of the solutions in sort of an infrastructure way. I think there are many solutions. Of course, looking at it from an ecological and cultural perspective is one of the ways, because we have so much, at least in Indian cities, that we can conserve and revive. But in addition to that, we definitely do need other additional sort of solutions, for at least when we're looking with respect to water. And the third is not only between India and cities from across the globe, but also bringing that connect between Indian cities itself to see if similar sort of practices can be sort of taken over by other cities. And to close, I really like the way you put saying we need to fight all the wars at the same time. So in the sense that we had to look at it at the national level, for a policy level, and maybe at the city level, and in all of these different ways. So I think I'll use this opportunity to maybe move to the next one and ask you another question on that end, which is if you could very quickly maybe highlight a measure or an approach that we can look at for Indian cities for mainstreaming resilience, maybe one each for in the short, medium, and long term. If I will get back to all of the other speakers as well. I wanted to quickly get their opening remarks, and then we could have a discussion around it. Moving forward, we'll also have a Q&A. So if the participants want to ask any questions, you can just drop it in the Q&A box, and we will get there in the next few minutes. Saurabh?
Yeah, thank you, Vaishnavi. I think, and this is where I felt as working here, when maybe both of my fellow panelists will agree. When you talk about resilience in a general manner or a holistic manner, no one really understands how to get it in the project form, and no one like it's a little far-fetched idea. We don't even have uh, the closest possible meaning of resilience in any of our languages, any of our regional languages. So it's a feels a little far-fetched of an idea, though we are a very resilient culture. Uh, I think looking at that as an initiative at a sectoral level will be very helpful for Indian cities. So if Indian cities start looking at resilience at maybe their top 2 or top 3 sectors which are suffering, for them will be maybe the starting point, and to start mainstreaming climate resilience or urban resilience within the city systems, because then you have a department head, then you have a clear mandate, then you have clear technical expertise which you can deploy to get urban resilience onto the ground at the project level. And I think the closest sector we should target for next decade is water. It is either we have too much of it or we have too little of it. I think Chennai had its very closest to day zero. We are going to see that for almost all of our cities. We should start planning our cities by keeping water in mind and the water systems in mind. So maybe that can be a closest to starting and mainstreaming urban resilience through a sector. And the second one is the waste management aspect. And I think if you see the newest research which on the plastic waste issue, the second most polluted river, which is putting more plastic into the ocean, is not one of our major river. It's a small river which flows from in Mumbai, really 20 kilometers of the length of Mumbai. And that is the top two rivers who put in the plastic in the ocean. So the waste management aspect will also be a very targeted on a sectoral level when it comes to government. That is only way where people will start to see and relate to resilience. So we have to make it on the sectoral level. And then, because when you do that, you can bring in the technical expertise, you can bring in professionals, you can bring in investments, you can bring in corporate partners. So you can deliver resilience via sector, and then you have people who do understand their sector and implement for that sector.
Great. I think that's a very helpful sort of a way to indicate to the practitioners and to the cities to identify the most vulnerable and the suffering sort of a sector. So then you'll also have the relevant departments and the policies and everything more focused sort of an approach. And I think that's very, very helpful. I think I'll also call in Nupur now to maybe if you could maybe recommend or maybe suggest one measure or maybe even an approach that the cities can look at in the short term, medium term, and sort of a long term approach in maybe in ecological planning or even just generally building resilience.
So thank you, Vaishnavi. I think we all are talking about resilience. We can take ecological planning, cultural heritage. The conversation is about saving our urban communities. We're going to have a lot of issues as we go along, or are already having a lot of issues. I think the short-term measure that I have myself been practicing, I can only speak from my own experience, is about cross-collaboration, about cross-disciplinarity, multidisciplinarity. And every discipline that you feel uncomfortable working with, please bring them into your fold and work with them on a project. That's my mandate. So when I'm working on water projects, I'm working with scientists, I'm working with social workers who are working in marginalized communities, and the communication. So I think short term is about collaboration and communication. And the moment you bring multiple disciplines on the same table, you realize that that is really where the challenge is. Because once they start talking to each other, I think a lot of problems get solved. In the medium term, I feel it's short also, but it's a medium term, which is that we have to look at our policy, our planning, our administration system very purely through the lens of the ecological and cultural narrative. All our planning, all the way we've been taught, our education systems come from another context. And there is so much disparity between what is formally coming to us and what is the informal reality around us, that now in like Saurabh said very beautifully, a 21st century solution has to be, how do we bring them together? The learnings from other societies, however, the solution has to be from our own context, our own, and we have a very particular cultural and ecological context. My long term actually is it's a dream which I'm seeing happening in many, at least the Nordic countries, which is they have a position like my colleagues are talking about the chief resilience officer. My dream is about a chief ecology officer, chief heritage officer that looks at natural and cultural heritage both. And it's not very far-fetched, because I go to conferences, even the landscape conferences, where you have a chief landscape architect for a country, and they make presentations on how the country is behaving, looking how the cities are behaving. So I don't think it's that far-fetched, but I also am looking at the professions that I represent of landscape architecture, cultural heritage and planning, to actually mainstream, play a mainstream role in politics and bureaucracy. Because I feel we have a third eye, not the Shiva's third eye of destruction. We have a third eye where we can see physical realities. We can look at a thing and say, this is how it's going to be if you do this, and this is how it will be if you take this step. I think our profession has to bring out that visualization that is very inherent in our practice and our learning, to bring out the wind projects and change what the urban physical reality is on ground. So yeah, thank you for the question, Vaishnavi.
Yeah, I think that it was very helpful, because you broke it down in these three sort of a step-by-step sort of a thing that the cities can actually look at. And I think even as practitioners, there are many things that they can actually take away, that they can start focusing on, at least for the short and the medium term, in a way how they can support the cities. With respect to one, of course, cross-collaboration and communication, immediately something that they can look at. And in the long term, to relook at our policies and regulations and make it more contextual in that particular sense. So maybe now I'll come back to Mahesh. If maybe you can draw relevance from the Pune strategy, maybe as to how you all went about identifying some of the actions for short, medium term, or just generally about whatever you think we have to start looking at. Because Pune may have been very specific, but if you want to draw anything from there, I think that would be very helpful to know.
Definitely. So when we were doing the consultation, we always used to come across a common theme or common issue. For example, when we were doing consultation about the urban environment, so solid waste was coming out as a priority area, even within urban environment, although the focus was more on water bodies and then the hills and the biodiversity part. Even during the consultation in other sector, for example, economy, we had another sector called economy. It used to go back to the solid waste management part, because a lot of informal workers are involved in the solid waste management part. So that's how we identified solid waste as a short-term area or priority area in the short term, which can be focused on, and that's how we continue to go with the Urban Ocean program, where we are focusing more on the plastic waste management, which was a gap in the existing system. And then there are certain actions which came during the consultation also, and then based on our inventory assessment. At the same time, we also thought about the planning process, which is like a lengthy process where we may not be able to influence in the short term, but definitely in the medium term and the long term. For example, Pune is building something like 40-kilometer network of metro rail, and there is a provision for transit-oriented development. There is a proposal to develop a TOD along that 500-meter on the coast side. So the area of Pune Corporation during that time was around 350 square kilometers. If you consider the 45-kilometer additional transit way going through the city, and then the TOD around that, which will be roughly around 90 square kilometer area, which is almost equivalent to 50% of the core city area. So definitely the planning for that, the design for that, it will have a substantial impact on the Pune's overall fabric and also on the overall infrastructure facility. So in our recommendation and in our action plan, we thought about it, and then we kind of recommended that even before going for a TOD kind of a measure, even giving certain FSI for a development, cities should first understand what is the critical nature of infrastructure, what is the carrying capacity of the infrastructure, and what they need to do. Some kind of a scenario analysis need to be done, because at the same time we are talking about the environmental aspect and the load on environment because of the infrastructure. So that is medium to long term, which is also impacting the overall development planning process, because development plan is typically prepared 10 years back. At that time, there was no TOD concept as such, and now suddenly it is coming. So you need some kind of a flexibility as well. So some of these aspects we have identified in the action, where we have mentioned that these measures like TOD need to be thoroughly studied first, identify the impact, build the scenario around that, and then decide how to build that over the period of time. At the same time, in future, keep in mind that you need a lot of flexibility in your development planning process, so that whenever there is a change in the demand or change in the characteristics, you need to bring that into development planning process. Otherwise, what will happen? You have a residential area at one place and then the workplace at other place, and then people need to commute a lot in between two areas. That's how we build the short-term and long-term measures.
Okay. I think this also directly answers one of the question our participant has. I'll just repeat the question in case you want to add a little bit more, because you've already elaborated as to how we'll try to integrate the resident strategy in the development plan. But the question we have from a participant is if you could explain how the resident strategy is integrated within Pune's development plan and smart cities program. And also in a way, if you could highlight some of the challenges that were faced in doing so. I feel you covered some of it, but in case you want to elaborate a little bit more.
So in addition to what I spoke earlier, I think as Saurav has mentioned, we precisely knew this problem. So there are 3 cities in the 100 resident cities network or RCN network, Pune, Surat and Chennai. Based on learning from those cities, we understood that we should have something at a national level, like urban resilience unit, where some of these actions or some of these initiatives can be taken up at a top level, which can be built into the mainstreaming of urban planning, maybe in the advisory capacity, and can be built into the smart city planning process as well. That's how not only working with the city is helpful, but at the same time, the units like urban resilience unit plays a very important role, where you can think about the long-term actions related to the development planning or the smart city-like initiatives, which can come from top down.
I think there's one other question. I'll probably again direct it to you, Mahesh, because we're talking about, at least the participant is asking what happens beyond the city administrative boundaries. At least when we talk about the urban local body or the municipal corporation, they have a jurisdiction within which they work. So what happens to situations when it's beyond the jurisdiction? So what kind of decision making goes into that process? Did you all face any sort of a similar sort of a issue in Pune? Maybe if you can highlight.
Yeah, so this is a typical issue in many of the cities. So what we did in our assessment, we did not restrict ourselves to Pune city itself. So Pune has a Pune city, Pimpri-Chinchwad city, and then there are developed villages or the agglomeration is there. So we kind of looked at mobility and urban environment, which are our pillars beyond Pune city limits. So we looked at larger boundaries when we were doing the assessment and preparing the action plan, precisely because of that particular reason. And third important reason in that is a lot of people travel across the city. So most of the people staying in Pune may not work here. They travel across the city to the IT park and other places. So we considered that aspect. In our consultation also, we involved the relevant stakeholders to understand what are the priority areas considering the larger urban agglomeration. At the same time, we also involved the Pune Metropolitan Region Development Authority, which is a PMRD, which is looking after 7,000 square kilometer area. And the head of the PMRD is also part of our steering committee, precisely for that reason, because mobility and urban environment do not have a particular municipal boundaries, administrative boundaries.
Yeah. Great. I think that was very, very helpful. Although it's not in the jurisdiction, but at least consider these different sort of sectors in a way which have that connections and try and integrate them. I think that That is very, very helpful, Mahesh. I think I'll go over to Nupur because there are some questions that we have from the participants. Maybe the first question, we can go one after the other. The first one is to co-create and, if you can elaborate some of the processes used to bring people and communicators in as innovators, and also if there are any challenges in doing so for the sake of co-creation that you were mentioning about.
Yeah, hi. So Vaishnavi, I'll take both the questions. Actually, Chitra's also got another question saying, how can the youth of urban areas in India be actively incorporated into efficiently implementing resilience activities? I'm going to address both together. So the one of the most important things in co-creation and understanding that communities themselves have to innovate, I'm going to repeat where I started actually, is that to understand that the communities already know. People already know. So I think that's the starting point of any resilience, because what you want is an empowered base. You want a very strong foundation, and you can't, because the climate events and disasters are only going to multiply. I mean, it's really, no one is going to deny that it's showing itself already. So we want people to be able to equip themselves. So I think one of the most important aspects is to start with what people know. Possible challenges are always to be dealt with. I mean, there are so many, there are only challenges. And I always say that when you enter a project, only enter with a solution mindset. And that solution mindset has to win-win. It has to be a mindset of win from the municipality perspective, and it has to be a mindset of win from the people perspective. We are only facilitating the win-win. We really are not playing a very, we're playing a pivotal role, but it's a pivot. We are not really the people who are taking the decisions. It's actually scalability at the level of municipality and projectization at the level of people. And I think the youth have to play a very important part in this, because we started many years back, almost from 2014 actively, but started thinking about it from 2010, how the 2030 agenda, how the sustainable development goals could actually be translated, because it would be people who are in their around 15 or 13 to 18 age group who are going to be playing some roles in the next 10, 15 years, right? So we started thinking about how proactively we could look at what a very senior colleague has called literacy. So it's not education, it's not degrees, and it's just creating environmental literacy. And environment, again, encompassing both culture and ecology. So really we need to look at with youth is in our formal education systems, our informal systems of, whatever we give to the youth has to be based on increasing their environmental literacy. And we are a culture jugaad, and we know that necessity is the mother of invention. Any problem that we have has a solution, and there is no better population than the youth who find the best solution. Every project I have done, I found that the innovation comes from that age group. So I think I would just say that go in thinking you know little, you're only facilitating, and then watch everything play out. As long as you're feeding the right, the literacy aspect is very, very, so yeah, that's where I would leave it. Thank you, Vaishnavi.
All right. I think that is very, very useful to know. I think youth definitely play an important role because they are the future. And I think we also see how this kind of really worked out during the pandemic across the country as to how they were pretty much at the forefront helping various other communities in a way. So of course they have a lot of potential, but like you said, they need that particular guidance and that literacy that you were talking about. I think that is very, very important and something that we can basically focus on. So I'll move on to Saurabh. I'll ask the next two questions maybe to Saurabh, but I'll also request the other panelists if they would like to chip in. One of the ones is on data collection and analysis and how cities can actually, or even the organizations that's collecting so much data across, help in tackling urban resilience, basically. If you could take that, Saurabh.
Yeah, I think I will just say that data collection is important, but maybe not just data collection, but data driven decision making That is what is important. I think one good example, which I think Pune did during the COVID-19 was the use of their data center to really look at the hotspots, look at the neighborhoods which were hotspots and mapping out those hotspots or for tracing. I think data is very important, but then we should not think of it as just a collection exercise. We will get as much as data as we want, but what is the main? I think before we jump into data collections and getting data, we should understand what is the use of the data, how we are going to use the data, what is the decision we want based on that data. I think that will help us more we have the technology, and I think, and we Indians are good in that technology. It's not something we don't know. We will teach others how to run that technology. It's not about the technology. It's about the structure, the use of it.
Yes, I would like to take the next question as well on the investment. So this participant is asking that considering our current situation and our priorities may lie on different other topics because we still like sort of developing in nature in that sense. So then how do we get this investment to basically build resilience?
I'm going to. I was. Yeah, I'm going to. I was going to type in my answer for that, but I said I will answer it live. So I will. I will just say maybe, in one word. Yes, we are developing, but we are also a developing economy. We do spend a lot of money. A lot of money. India spends a lot of money in infrastructure. We have capex. We actually have less than what we need. But we do have capex investments. All we need to think about that we need to resolve 3 problems by same investment. That is what is resilience is all about. If you understand that a particular piece of infrastructure has to do more than what it is intended to do. So for maybe one of the good examples, Marina Barrage in Singapore, where it stops the storm surge. It is also a raw water treatment facility, and it also is a public park. The facility, the top of that facility is a public park. So it is solving 3 or 4 challenges which happen. I think also I will sometimes we forget that the investment when we are doing, actually we are at the correct location for investment. We will not even build the infrastructure we need. So maybe we should just leapfrog. We leapfrog. We don't need to do the 20th century infrastructure. We leapfrog into 21st century. We don't need to do the Chicago River. We don't need to do the transportation network, which maybe other cities are. We leapfrog and we do the 21st century one. Maybe we will be the best practices when Africa comes developing, or when other regions will be developing. So I guess it's about channelizing that. The second one, I think, and this is where I think more than investment, is I know everyone jumps on investment. I know we are running short of time. I'm going to take 1 minute. It's about capacity. We lack capacity at our city council levels, and I think as maybe as part of the center, maybe one of the work is to not just the build capacity in the current employees or the current structures within our cities, but to really make it attractive for youth to join the corporations and work for there, and making it sure that we are not just hiring engineers or civil engineers for that, but you're hiring urban planners, you're hiring economists, landscape architects. Why can't landscape architects head the environment department of the city? Why can't an urban planner lead how many years we will require a town planner to do the city development plan? We require an urban planner to do a city development plan. Where is my chief urban planner? We have a chief engineer. Where is my chief urban planner in my city? We don't. So it will work both ways, not just the money. You build the capacity, the money will come.
And I think I totally agree with you that we have to build capacity, and the money is definitely there, and also to like sort of leverage the ongoing work, because to build resilience, we don't need to put any additional sort of. It's not like a separate project that we need to build resilience. We just need to strengthen all the work that's happening, keeping the climate in perspective, and your investments are already basically taken care of. And if I can also just add a little bit on the data sort of point that one of the participants raised. So I think data collection is one of the things, but like Saurabh brightly said, data informed decision making, so translating that is the bigger challenge. And maybe here I can just quickly highlight the Climate Smart Cities assessment framework that we conduct and the results that was announced last year. So it is very, very helpful for cities to understand where they stand and where they can basically prioritize. So the data in that way is kind of a powerful sort of information that the cities can actually use to like maybe prioritize and take particular decision. So I think we do have, okay, these are answers to the question. So that is pretty great. Okay, I think we are also very close to cutting the time shooting off. So this has been a very interesting and engaging discussion today. And I think if I can just pull out like 3 points from the discussion today. One is, of course, what Saurabh said was to like focus on the vulnerable sectors and then dedicate all your efforts towards that would be a starting point. And I think I'll take back what Nipul said on, the win-win between the people and the municipality. So kind of threading between that and balancing that is something challenging, and also seeking for answers from the youth and from the people is something that we can definitely rely on. And from on-ground experience that Mahesh highlighted on Pune, especially I'll take back what you mentioned about beyond the jurisdiction and how we can actually bring them in the strategies and plans. I think that is very, very useful moving forward. So I hope the participants are also able to take back something helpful that they can basically reflect in their work. And before we close, I'll just take another 5 minutes from you all. We have a short feedback session. This will really help us streamline our further sessions. So if everyone can, maybe the participants can use your phone and log on to www.menti.com. You can also see it on your screen. Once you log on, you'll have to just use the code, which is 95073532. And if we can move to the next question. So we would like to know on a scale of 1 to 5, how we would like to rate this particular session on 3 parameters. One is the relevance and usefulness of the content, the ease of understanding, and also the interaction that we had with the speakers. We'll just wait a couple more seconds for people to like log on to menti.com and maybe answer this particular question. Maybe we can move to the next question, because I think the participants will be able to answer this question if they're still logging in. If y'all can type in the key takeaways that y'all are going to take back from this particular session. It could be a word, it could be a short sentence. Y'all can just drop in the chat box if you'll have any issues logging onto this. think Nupur's point on collaboration and literacy is something that has really popped up and useful. And of course, the knowledge on urban resilience and the role of people. So this would probably rely on the sector-specific point that Saurabh was mentioning about. I think the cultural and natural aspects is also one of the things, definitely. Of course, the data-driven decision making as well. Yeah. Maybe if we can go to the next question. So for all of the participants who left your email IDs, we could also share the results of this feedback if that is something that you're looking forward to. So our next question is basically if you all have any other suggestions for us as to how we can maybe enhance this particular e-learning series that we have for the next 9 weeks. I think we're going to leave this box open and you all can please type in your suggestions. But in the meanwhile, what I'll do is I'll take this time to thank all of you, firstly for the feedback, because this is definitely going to help us for our upcoming sessions. So the next learning series session is on 22nd July, which is next Thursday at 3 p.m. And we'll be focusing on air pollution in the next session, specifically on the tools to measure air pollution and also the sector-wise actionable points that basically you can use to tackle air pollution. And I hope you'll be able to join us for those sessions as well. I now thank all of our 3 speakers for joining today and sharing their experience and expertise with us, because I think it has been a very interesting learning. And it's also to bring all of those different points and the different perspectives that you mentioned about on like one particular platform. I think in that way, this was a very interesting discussion. So thank you all. And also special thanks to all of our participants who joined us today, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. So definitely we'll take this feedback of the suggestions and we'll try and incorporate them for our next sessions. So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.